I'm Masiga Shegutsembatia to bring you this morning's news update live here on Channel 44 on the 30th of January 2023. We'll start with what's happening here in Uganda. 4,000 moved in major CID staff shakeup. The president wants officers to fight corruption. Details are in today's New Vision on page 3, and I get to know who has been moved to major CID staff. And VP Alupo commends interreligious unity. The Vice President Jessica Alupo and the third Deputy Minister Rukia Nakadama are seen here receiving blessings from the Bishop of Jinja Catholic Diocese, Charles Martin Wamika, during a fundraiser for the newly created St. Joseph Catholic Church, Bukoba in Mayuge district yesterday. And moving on PLE alternatives for over 100,000 pupils who failed their primary living examinations. The New Vision brings you 6 pages of PLE stars in today's papers. Get to know who is one of the stars that the New Vision has highlighted. There is Fahim Kalanzi of Hope Junior School, Chetume, Joshua Kiprotich in Kokonjeru, Hanifa Namilembe in Poma Junior School, and very many others, over 6 pages. The New Vision has over 140 job offers in Public Service Commission, Uganda Railway Corporation, Uganda Kolping Society, School for Life Foundation, Gulu University, and over 60 tenders in the Antonde local government, Skoll, Koika International, UEC, and very many others. And up to the Daily Monitor, URA on the spot, over 340 billion shillings gold tax row. The revelations come amid comments by President Yoweri Museveni that the tax collector has corrupt elements who must be checked to stop loss of revenue to the country. And details are in today's Daily Monitor on page 4 and 5. PLE results, the hits, misses, and what's next. They bring you stars. The Daily Monitor also brings you different stars from schools. Vivian Bantu from Victorious Education Services. Humphrey Odong from Mother Ludia Primary School in Gulu. Jeremiah Mwase from Vic View Nursery and Primary School, Jinja, and very many others. Museveni red flags URA over graft. Over 200 refugees to benefit from irrigation scheme. The project is under the Uganda Intergovernmental Fiscal Transfer Program, which is funded by the government of Uganda with support from the World Bank. In today's Daily Monitor, Varsity boss wants talks over fees. And also in other news, the man who sued woman for refusing to marry speaks out in today's Daily Monitor. And the Daily Monitor also brings you, take note of this bone cancer signs. There are 3 types of bone cancer, but the commonest in Uganda is osteosarcoma, which mostly affects children and young adults between the age of 20 to 35. Very many stories in today's Daily Monitor. And also, allow me bring you today's international news update. I'll now be joined by Livingstone Kawesi for sign language interpretation and translation. The Somali government says it has killed more than 130 fighters from the Islamist militant group Al-Shabaab, including top commanders. It says a joint operation was carried out with Somalia's international partners, which include the U.S. military. Over the last 6 months, the Islamic State group, which has relatively small footprint in the country, has also lost swathes of territory as the result of an operation led by pro-government forces. It is impossible to independently verify the details of this attack, but the Somali government has described what sounds like a significant setback for Al-Shabaab An information minister said 136 jihadist fighters had been killed in a joint operation with Somalia's international partners. Just 3 days ago, the U.S. said its special forces had killed a senior militant leader during a raid in the north of the country. Several years ago, Bilal al-Sudani split away from the al-Qaeda-linked al-Shabaab and played a key role trying to boost the presence of the Islamic State group in other parts of the continent, including Mozambique, Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. Moving on, Nigeria's central bank has extended the deadline to exchange old banknotes for redesigned ones. There have been long queues at some banks as Nigerians have struggled to meet the original deadline of Tuesday. People now have until 10th of February to do the swap. The redesign of the higher denomination Naira notes has been heavily criticized, with analysts saying 6 weeks was not enough for Africa's most populous country to phase out the old currency. It is happening a few weeks before the country goes to the polls in presidential and parliamentary elections. Elsewhere, Boris Johnson has said Vladimir Putin threatened him with a missile strike in an extraordinary phone call in the run-up to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The then Prime Minister said Mr. Putin told him it would take only a minute. Mr. Johnson said the comment was made after he warned the war would be an utter catastrophe during a very long call in February 2022. Details of the exchange were revealed examining Mr. Putin's interactions with world leaders. Mr. Johnson warned Mr. Putin that invading Ukraine would lead to Western sanctions and more NATO troops on Russia's borders. Still about Ukraine, President Volodymyr Zelensky says that allowing Russia to compete in the 2024 Olympics in Paris would amount to showing that terror is somehow acceptable. He said he had raised the issue with French President Emmanuel Macron. Moscow must not be allowed to use the Olympics for propaganda, and the International Olympics Committee has said Russia and Belarusian athletes could compete as neutrals at the Olympics. Ukraine has threatened to boycott Paris 2024 if Russia and Belarusian athletes are allowed to compete. The German Chancellor has ruled out sending fighter jets to Ukraine just days after committing to supplying tanks. In an interview with the German newspaper, Olaf Scholz warned against a bidding war for weapons. Ukraine has asked allied nations to create a fighter jet coalition to bolster their capabilities. The U.S. said it would discuss the idea of supplying jets very carefully with Kyiv on Thursday. In an interview, Mr. Scholz said his focus was on delivery of German-made Leopard 2 tanks. In the Middle East, the Iranian Defense Ministry says it has foiled a drone attack on a military facility in the city of Isfahan. The ministry said 3 drones were involved, but there were no casualties. 1 drone was destroyed by air defense systems and 2 were caught by defense traps, causing minor damage to a building, according to the ministry. The extent of damage to the site has not been confirmed by the press, and there has been no immediate claim of responsibility. Hussein Amir Abdullahian, Iran's foreign minister, said the cowardly incident was an attempt to destabilize the country. And elsewhere, at least 4 people have died after New Zealand's largest city experienced its wettest day on record. On Friday, Auckland is said to have received 75% of its usual summer rainfall in just 15 hours. A local state of emergency was declared as authorities managed evacuations and widespread flooding. New Zealand's Prime Minister Chris Hipkins thanked emergency services for their swift response to the disaster. The new Prime Minister traveled to Auckland, where he also expressed his condolences to the loved ones of those who died in the floods. And moving on, the lawyer representing Tyrone Cole's family in the United States has called on the U.S. Congress to pass urgent police reform legislation in the wake of his death. Mr. Nichols, who is aged 29, was fatally beaten by 5 police officers in January. Speaking to U.S. media, Ben Crump urged President Joe Biden to use Mr. Nichols' death to gain support for the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act. And he said Mr. Nichols' mother was coping with her son's loss by hoping that his death could lead to change. She believes in her heart that her son was sent here for an assignment and that there is going to be greater good that comes from the tragedy. And finally, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has suggested that Ankara may agree to Finland joining NATO, but not Sweden. He criticized Sweden's refusal to extradite dozens of people allegedly tied to Kurdish militant groups and other critics of his government. His comments come days after Turkey suspended talks to accept the 2 Nordic nations as members. The move was prompted by a series of controversial protests in Stockholm, including one during which a copy of the Quran was banned. Well, that brings us to the end of this morning's news update. Thank you for watching Channel 44. I remind you, we are still helping the people of Karamoja. Please join us by sending your seed to the numbers that will be available during the services. Alternatively, you can bring your seed to the Miracle Center Cathedral at the church reception or during the revival services that happen every evening in the church auditorium. Pastor Robert Kayanja will be praying for everyone that is sowing seed, and you'll be tremendously blessed. The Pastors Now program is up next. Stay tuned and watch how God is moving in this place, how different people are being touched through the ministry of Pastor Robert Kayanja, and you will also be blessed and your life will not remain the same again. God bless you. We'll meet again at 12:45. Enjoy your morning.